Okay, welcome. It is Wednesday, September 29th at 6:30 p.m. This is a special select board meeting. I'm Roger Arnold. I am in Tracy Hall. I'm joined by Rod Francis and Miranda Bergmeyer. Remotely is Mary Layton, Claudette Berchoux, Marcia Calloway, and Rob Gear, all board members. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous, thank you. Next is public and select board comment. Are there any folks who would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no hands, any select board comments? Okay, excellent. We've already borrowed some time. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, the update on the recruitment of the permanent town manager. So board will discuss recruitment materials from VLCT and make approvals. Motion required. We might make a couple motions because there's a couple of questions, right? So why don't I just begin by asking for people's reactions to the material provided by Rick McGuire. Was there anything that jumped out to anybody? And then I'll get into more specific questions. Go ahead, Mary.
I like that, at least in the initial stages, when we receive resumes, just that there could be a citizen committee to help look at them. I think some citizen participation is really good. I think that's helpful in this town and just helpful in general.
Sure. Any other folks have any sort of initial? Thank you, Mary. Any other folks have any initial reactions to the materials? Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, one of the questions I had for Rick, and I don't know if you have an answer. It seemed as though the initial screening committee was not going to be the same group of people that were going to be doing the panel interviews.
Right. My understanding, Claudette, is that there'll be, I think in part to make sure that there's a broad array of individuals participating, is that there'll be one committee to do the screening of the candidates. And then there'll be a second committee who would move to make the recommendation ultimately. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, that's how I read it. I just wanted to clarify. And
Yes.
then that's it.
Okay. Cool. So why don't we work through, I actually would like to begin with the proposed advertisement, if that's okay, because there's, I think, some questions that are on there that we can just answer by way of just purely administrative questions that we'll answer, and then we'll go back. So on the job description, which is page 4 of the packet, Rick asks us, under the successful candidate will have a minimum of a bachelor's degree from an accredited college in business administration or public administration. A master's degree is preferred. He asks if it is preferred or required. Any thoughts on that question? Go ahead, Claudette.
I say preferred instead of required, just to potentially expand the pool. And also the level of experience, someone with a bachelor's degree, but 20 years of functioning in the role might be appropriate.
Right.
Just a thought.
Okay, great. Anyone agree with Claudette? Go ahead, Mary, or have thoughts?
I do agree with Claudette, and also think that sometimes you can get someone with military experience that's quite valuable. So I would leave that as preferred.
Okay. Anyone disagree? Otherwise, we'll just say that it is preferred. Marcia, go ahead.
I don't disagree at all. I think bachelor's degree, of course, is non-negotiable, but when we're talking about equivalent combination, that's a little bit vague, maybe purposely, but
Mhm.
I'm hoping to see education in the mix.
Sure. Well, it does say we'll have a minimum of.
Right.
The only thing I would say is it doesn't necessarily have to be a business administration or public administration. I believe the language is a related field. So, okay, so it sounds like we have an answer to that question. Do you want to, do folks just really want, do folks want to begin with the salary range, or he asks, this needs to be set by the select board. The salary range is proposed as 85,000 to 102,000. For context, this most recent budget, we had budgeted 95,000 roughly for the town manager's salary. Does anyone disagree with that range? We also, for context, and has been a part of previous packets, we had a compensation sheet that VLCT has provided that gave us context for these salaries in Vermont more broadly. So I think this is informed by both our history and also that sheet. Thoughts? Go ahead, Mary.
I think it sounds like a fine range. We'll have to sort out when we receive applicants, just where that applicant fits and why we think so.
Okay. Rob or Claudette or Marcia?
I think that if that's the current going range and the LTC has blessed it, then I think that's the best we can do.
Do you feel otherwise?
No?
No, okay, just checking.
This seems appropriate.
Okay, Claudette, I was watching your facial expression. Okay. Yes, it is a big range, I think, so. Yeah, okay.
Well, I would say that, I mean, the top, the 102 is, seems a bit high, but you know, you never know. Yes, I do understand the VLCT report on salary range, but I mean, if it takes 102,000 to bring a very highly qualified candidate, then so be it. But I would hope we could get by with a little less, truthfully.
Yeah, so noted. Okay, so I'm gonna come back and ask for a motion for that later, because it says that it should be set by the select board, and so I think it's appropriate to actually do so. So I'll come back to that. The preferred deadline to receive applications is, right? And it says needs to be determined. I don't know if that is something that we need to determine, but you'll see that they have a soft deadline, and that the soft deadline is quite soon, really.
What does quite soon mean?
Well, it says October, which is soon.
Right.
So perhaps like the end of October.
Okay. Or the middle.
I believe in the material that Rick submitted, there was an October 29th date in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Okay.
If, I mean, it would seem as though he believes we can pull this all together and get the advertisements out in time to have
Replies by that time.
applications by that date.
You can
His,
try it and see.
his asking for responses to his interview questions this week indicates that he's ready to go as soon as he gets a consensus and approved.
Right. So just so the public understands, Rob is referencing the fact that part of the scope of work the VLCT will do is an interview, a one-on-one interview with each of us. And he indeed impressed. He pressed us if we didn't reply within 48 hours. So like he's moving expediently. So yes. Okay. So it sounds like, is there anything else about the actual proposed advertisement that you would like revised? Otherwise, we'll get some answers to these questions and I think we're good.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so that's good. So let's go back to, I think another thing that we need to decide is this charge. The charge for the town manager screening committee. There's a draft committee charge. This is on page 7. It gives some guidance, right, of what this committee would do. It would review all applications. He had told me that people can be prepared to spend 6 to 9 hours at least on this. So there is a commitment. You see that in one of the steps, where is it? It doesn't actually, it must have been in a conversation that he had with me. There's a couple, how we determine this screening committee is up to us. It could be usually it would be 2 members of the select board for a screening committee. And his suggestion was that you aim to be nimble and that the committee consists of 5 folks, right? So we might be looking for 3 people that are not on the board for this screening committee. He suggested that we look to make appointments, or that typically you would make an appointment process. You would make recommendations for people to fulfill the screening committee. And I know that in the past, Mary, correct me, there was a bit of an application process like we would do any committee. Was that how you remember it?
I don't remember too much about it, but I think there was an application process. It was more than 5 people though, too, I believe. And it was tremendously helpful to have people go through the applications, the initial ones.
So my understanding is that we should be looking for 3 other folks to form this screening committee. And so there's 2 of us for this screening committee and then 3 other folks. We could make some appointments. We can make some requests of people. We could put up the charge and use the standard application we have for it, and gauge interest that way. But I think the bottom line is it needs to be nimble and it needs to be quick.
Interesting.
Go ahead, Claudette.
I think we should go with the application process we have for various appointed committees. And I think we should put the charge out by the end of the week with a
Okay.
call for applicants and have it decided in our first meeting in October.
Okay.
Assuming we
Anyone
get
have any?
volunteers, right?
Assuming we have
So-
volunteers.
Perhaps if we as backup, we could try to think of people who might be willing and able that would be acceptable, just as backup.
I think it is always acceptable too that board members reach out to folks about this. This is, hey, I think you would be
Right.
great to serve on this. We would be foolish to characterize it as our choices, but we should just do some outreach on our own.
Sure.
We're welcome to do that.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Just to the extent that it's going to be an application process, I really would insist that the people come and present their application.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes. Yes.
Good point.
Marcia hasn't had the benefit of seeing that really happen. It has been more of our norm, but yes, I understand your insistence.
This is
Um,
important.
Yes. Yes. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so we'll,
Claudette's suggestion.
okay. So it sounds like we all agree by consensus. Go ahead, Claudette. Sorry.
And I would say the deadline for this initial call would be the Thursday before or the Friday before our, in time to get the applicants in the packet. So whatever that deadline would be.
So you're looking really at,
Thursday, right?
well, what's today? Today's Wednesday. So you're really looking at, tomorrow. Oh, no. Oh,
No,
we
no,
have a
no, no,
week
no. We
off.
have another week.
Week
So we
off.
have about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
it'll be the
Sorry.
Okay, on the
Seventh?
calendar.
The
7th.
joy, the joy that appeared,
Yeah.
impressive.
I know, I don't have to
Just-
make another agenda. Okay, yeah, great.
Seventh,
Yes, the 7th.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Comic relief. Yes, I think that's great. I think the timing actually could work out really well. Okay, should we move on from that? Sounds like we have a plan for that screening committee.
Mhm.
Was there any other decision that needed to be made this evening? Oh, the other thing is, and I have to talk back with Rick on this, and check with our folks in the town manager's office. I think there, you can see that there was a note where the recruiter would assist the town in some kind of survey. So I think this needs to, so my suggestion in order to make sure that we had lots of public feedback was a 3-question survey, 3-question open-ended survey, where it might be, what is it, you might ask 3 questions like, what is it that you want? I think similarly to actually what Herb has put out in the past, I think when he was doing a police chief survey, you might ask, what are the qualities you're looking for in a town manager? What are some of the challenges you think the town manager would face? And then what kind of questions you would ask the town manager? I'm kind of only keen on that last question. So that way we could use questions that people have for a town manager, perhaps in an interview process. But this is something we would have to lead on, and because it would require some kind of analysis, it really, I'll repeat the idea of it has to be nimble. So I like actually just one question, but how do other folks feel?
So when would we have to process this? Just trying to think out the time frame. We'd have to send it out and then we'd have to read a lot. So hoping we can handle it.
So for the screening committee, right, we're probably gonna have 2 board members serve on it, and then we might have another board member be the person who is organizing the Excel spreadsheet of these questions, and they could be sent to the screening committee for their work, or for a future committee for wherever in the process we're conducting the actual interviews.
So questions would be more useful for that process. If it's
Yeah,
just question. And
I think this, sorry, go ahead, Mary.
even that might end up being a lot, but that would make it, people's concerns would be embedded in their questions, I think.
Yes, I
Let's
think
keep it really simple. Just say, what are your questions? I think that might be wise if we're trying to keep to a tight time frame. And hopefully it's enough wiggle room for everyone who's a citizen to, express what they want to see. They just ask it in question form.
right. Anybody else have thoughts? Go ahead, Marcia.
I was worried about too much open-ended stuff because it's really hard to, analyze. So maybe if we could have 3 crisp questions with maybe, I don't know, 4 answers and a room for other, we might be able to tabulate things a little more easily, but still leave some room for people to put in something, that's just unique to them.
Right.
I'm,
Rob, do you have an idea? So
Yeah,
Rob and
well,
Claudette.
I think just what question would you ask is too open-ended. It should be a little bit more focused, maybe characteristics, what questions might you ask to find out what characteristics are important to the town manager, but a little bit less open-ended. What I worry about is these might be, if we have too many questions, they might be leading questions that would
Yeah.
indicate a bias.
well, they definitely will be,
Mhm.
because that's how people will express what they want. If you leave
The
it open.
answers, yeah.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a nightmare, like grading essays.
right.
Except you're not grading essays. You're just
Summarize it.
Fun.
Well, you
Summarizing.
have to analyze it.
Yeah, and there's, at every stage, even with a summary, there's a possibility of a skewed viewpoint, which is one reason it's a good thing to just have, some bullet points. But I see the point. Wherever we go, we're going to have the possibility of it being skewed.
Okay, Claudette, what are your thoughts?
I think 2 questions. What characteristics are you looking for in a town manager? And then what do you, somehow maybe even just the one question, what characteristics are you looking for in a new town manager? I think if we get into too many questions, we get too much. Yeah,
I mean, it's not, I think like ultimately it's not, we're not surveying the community, right? We are providing an opportunity to inform the interview process, so I think that's the distinction. And I think we get that, but I think people
So-
shouldn't think, yeah.
yeah. So maybe the second question could be, if you were interviewing a candidate, what's the most important question you would ask?
Yeah.
So the characteristics they're looking for, and what's your priority? What's the most important question you would ask?
Great.
Should we
I think that's
limit
where we,
on the,
I think,
on
go ahead.
the characteristics, should we limit the amount of verbiage? Or not?
I think we should have more faith in whoever is analyzing the 2 questions with an understanding that it will take some commitment on their part to
To
sort
sort
it
it
through.
out. Okay,
That's just it. I have faith in whomever it is, not it.
well, I like Claudette's idea of the 2 questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go with that.
Okay, and of course Miranda wrote them down, right? Do you want to repeat them, Claudette?
The first question was what characteristics are you looking for in a town manager?
Uh-huh.
And the second question, if she's ready,
She is.
if you were part of the interview committee, what's the most important question you would ask the candidate?
That's great. Okay, Linda Cook, you have a public comment. Go ahead.
Yes, 2 questions. Don't you have 3 questions? The third one being other?
I don't want
Leave it open
another.
to the-
No, we don't want
Okay,
other.
it's not either. Okay. The second part is, how is this going to be delivered to everyone in Norwich? is there going to be paper copies available? Or all computer driven or monkey survey, or what's the method of delivery to the residents?
I think it would be a monkey survey, a survey monkey, actually.
No
But yes.
paper copies?
I don't think, I mean, I'll ask the board, but again, this is not a survey. This is an opportunity to effectuate the interview process, which because of the importance of the schedule. And the only thing I'll say is that this was actually not part of something that is actually in the scope of work that VLCT is providing. It's something they're willing to work with us on.
And we definitely don't have the time for any kind of mailing. So, yeah, Survey Monkey.
Yep, but we welcome ideas to draw as much attention to it as possible. Thank you, Linda. Cheryl Lindbergh, go ahead.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. My question is to determine whether someone wants to be involved in the process. Will there be a point in time where candidates that are maybe the last or the top three will have a chance to be meeting and interviewed by employees and local officials separately, or is that part of your thinking process for this, so that, you know, if I was interested, I don't take up a seat over there because I'll have a chance over here later on?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. It's a good question, and I'm clearly trying to focus on getting us started with this this screening committee. But there is an opportunity where there are some candidates who've already been screened to meet some town staff and to come before sort of a different group. So I don't know to what extent their sort of tour will be, so to speak, but there's definitely plans for candidates to meet with town staff and town staff to be asked for their input.
So could that mean elected officials, or you're not certain on that?
It could be an elected officials.
Okay. And so just to go back to one thing briefly before that you mentioned, the last search committee, I mean, last time we had a town manager search, it was a search committee that handled the process, is my recollection. And I remember several of the individuals that were on that committee, and they brought forth, I think, 3 recommendations to the select board or something like that. Does that ring a bell, Mary?
Yeah, I think it might have been more like 5.
Okay.
Because I think then we had an interview process. And I think a lot of that committee was involved in the final interviews, the final review.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of input, and I believe you were there, the town clerk. I forget if fire chief at the time, but I mean, there were, and also citizens. So yeah, there was a lot of review and a lot of involvement, which I thought was good.
It was a pretty large search committee too.
Yes, it was. It was more than, yeah.
It was
It
9
was.
or 9 or 11. There was definitely an odd number.
Yeah, it was definitely of that size. I remember that part.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
And there's more. I think some of your other curiosities are part of the materials that are in the packet, Cheryl. And the only thing I'll say is it was suggested to me that, you know, we need to be efficient, and efficiency often means 5, but, you know, no one says it has to be. It would, I think, to have something like 9 would probably go against the recommendation of our consultant, but
Well,
that's just my
Roger,
opinion.
was the 5 for the initial group? And then it would
Yeah,
shift to possibly a larger group if for the final candidates?
Yeah, so you'll see that it was, I think it seems like in the language in the materials, he often refers to 5 to 7 communities. And then he also, in some of his steps, includes some suggested membership.
Sure.
And so in the second half, it includes 1 to 2 staff members and 1 to 2 members of the public.
Right. So it could be slightly larger, but we do want to move this through efficiently too.
Yeah, and we have some recent examples of what happens when we make a committee too large. That's all I'll say. Go ahead, Marcia.
On
Well,
page,
it's starky, but okay. Sorry.
Sorry, what page? Go ahead, Marcia.
on page 3, step 5, it's the final interview process.
Right.
And that's where it says 5 to 7 community members and or staff.
Yep.
So it's really up to us, right?
Yes, we have recommendations but they're our consultant that we are paying. So, yep. Go ahead, Mary.
I found the last time around when we got to the final interviewees, that it was just very helpful to have the same questions for each candidate. And in writing, we're all sitting there, you can set up a binder and record their remarks and so forth. So just that was a very good process at the end
Okay, great.
for input.
So I said, so let's go back. So there's like two sort of actions that we need to take. We want to post, so we want to advertise for the screening committee, and we want to set the rate, the pay range. So can I get some motions for that? So why don't we begin with the pay range? You would like to make a motion?
Let's see, I move to approve the pay range for the proposed long-term town manager as $85,000 to $102,000 per year.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, made by Mary and seconded by Marcia. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the second action that we wanted to do we want to just say that we'll do that by consensus, or do people want to make a motion?
Say again, this one. This is on the
Yeah.
search committee decisions.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, yeah,
What would
let's
that-
make a motion.
Would
We have
that be
a
in the-
motion. We have a motion in our motion sheet to approve the proposed recruitment plan. So we can take the motion that's on our motion sheet if we would like that sort of,
Let's do-
that might be
Yeah,
helpful.
let's do it that way.
Great.
I move to approve the proposed town manager recruitment plan and associated materials as included in the select board meeting packet.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Rob, made by Mary. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Thanks. That's great. And so we have agreement on this recruitment plan, and I took the motion for the salary because it seemed important to set. Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, just wondering who's going to be responsible for SurveyMonkey and putting it out on the listserv.
So I think, so we can take a motion for that. I think we talked about how town staff would help us do the advertising for the screening committee. I think the membership for the screening committee and the SurveyMonkey, we could think about it, or we can decide now. What do you think?
I think we should decide now. Get
Okay.
it done. Get her done.
Okay. Who would, so Herb had a paid account for the SurveyMonkey. I don't know, looking at town staff, they're giving me facial expressions. We'll have to look into if we have the paid software to use. But who would like, so I think the person who takes the leadership in the survey should leave space for 2 other people to join the screening committee. How about that? So if you're volunteering for the survey, I would say that maybe don't serve on this first committee.
I'll do the survey.
Okay, great. Does anyone, well, there were Claudette's questions, so it would make sense that she could work with town staff to develop it.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So we'll say agree by consensus that Claudette will do that. Okay. I'm seeing yeses. Go ahead, Marcia. We have a,
does that mean that you have to do all the collating? Or do you want help
Even
with
me?
that?
I'd be happy to. We'll see,
Yeah,
we'll
she's
see
on
what
it.
the response is. If I get overwhelmed, then I'll ask for help.
Okay, I'm there
Yeah.
for you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay. Who would like to serve on this initial screening committee where they ultimately make 8 to 10, it looks like 8 to 10, you know, they call to 8 to 10 candidates. So who would like to serve on that one? Miriam, you're interested? Yeah. Okay, and Rob and Marcia, are you? So the one I'll say before I collect this is that Rick did tell me that the goal is that board members will have met the eventual hire at least twice. They will have 2 opportunities, and I believe there's a space for a specific board interview too. So it's not, there's plenty of opportunities. Okay, so Mary's interested. Marcia, I saw your hand.
Mhm.
Okay, Rob, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll agree by consensus that Mary and Marcia will be our board representatives for the screening committee, and that Claudette will survey monkey or another platform. We'll see. Okay, great. I think we got everything that we needed to do, but we'll find out. Shall we move on?
Sounds good.
Okay. Revisions to the gift policy in towns master financial policies. Okay. So I think, so Marcia, were you the first on this?
Gift?
Who was the first person on the?
You were,
the gift
Roger.
policy? Oh, sorry. I was prepared to do the other policy first, but that's not what the agenda says. The gift policy. Can you talk, Claudia, can you introduce this? Do you mind? I can. I just won't stop talking.
Okay, so this is, I don't know what more to say than what we've said in the past. We're trying to clean it up and be clear and make sure that the select board is aware of what donations are being solicited by our appointed committees, commissions, departments, et cetera, to make sure that they are in line with our overall goals, that they don't, that especially they're not made in such a way that they impact the operational or capital budget especially the operational budget, without us being aware of them. And having some say into whether or not we approve or accept the donations. One of our stumbling blocks was the rec department. With their, I can't remember the term, Roger, about what they use, but the Gerard, or the phrase they use for these funds, but the Gerard Fund being the one that is most known. And this policy actually specifies, from my read anyway, that the Gerard Fund is the only charitable fund under the heading of the rec department. And the Gerard Fund has some specific guidelines for use. So is that your read too, Roger?
Yeah, I mean,
You've had the
certainly.
discussions with Bree.
Yeah, I think the intention of this policy is, and what was that the Gerard Fund, which is established, has already been established and has a specific purpose, has been acknowledged here in this gift policy. I think it's referred to as a named fund, and it says that at this time, there are no other funds like it, and that any other funds like it, we should talk about in the future, basically, is the sense of it. So we originally, I think our last discussion thought that we would exempt the recreation department, acknowledging that there were different needs. The concern that I brought to Claudette is that creates an inequity rather than a special circumstances. It creates an inequity across other departments, and I didn't want to introduce that. So this is just simply saying that for all small donations all small donations can be accepted, and that if there are things that are larger, it should come to approval of the board. Bree has talked to us about the need for a scholarship fund, or that there's some uses for a scholarship fund, but we have no record of that existing, right? And if it exists, let us know, because this policy doesn't acknowledge it.
Hey, Roger, can I answer that right now? So
Sure.
I use that scholarship fund every summer for one specific family, and I just found out about another family with 3 children who I am actually about to put into our aftercare. And if I can't keep that scholarship fund alive, I cannot allow this low income family into aftercare. I mean, I asked to be included in these discussions and no one reached out to me. These are really easy answers that I could have provided and no one asked me.
Bree, we've had preliminary conversations, and you've been present at our meetings. So I'm happy to take I'm happy, please don't interrupt me. I'm happy to take a second reading on this policy. And then now that you've had the benefit, I'll take some more board comments to make sure that their boards don't have any other concerns. And then we're happy to formally pass it on where I'll write a message and copy the board as an FYI, where you can then weigh in on anything further. There's no intention to we don't want to necessarily exclude any good work you've done for equitable reasons. Claudette, go ahead.
I get that, actually. I'm not, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
Okay,
Just
yeah.
hearing that we don't use our scholarship fund. I use it more than people think, and it's pretty plain that we do. So if there's an issue there, I wish somebody had talked to me if it's not clear, because that's not on my end, and I'm happy to help solve that. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about why we need these funds.
Thank you, Bree. Claudette, did you have your hand up?
I did. If I recall, on the rec site, there was no official listing of a scholarship fund.
Yeah, I took it down, actually, Claudette, because I was told that I couldn't solicit for any funds. So all of that is not public right now.
And does the Girard Fund not cover scholarships?
It doesn't, actually, because the Girard Fund covers the most good for the most people. So those are for wider funds. So that would be like something that would be used by the entire community. That's what the Girard Fund calls for, that's their mission of that fund. But scholarship funds are anonymous, and they're directed towards people who contact me personally with hardship.
So thank you, Bree. So I'm going to take board member comments about this policy as drafted, right? And then I'm going to, depending on what I hear from folks, I'm going to ask for a second reading. It will not be in an adoption. Then I'm going to actually send it to Rod as interim to facilitate and to have the benefit of also his review, right? Or the town's, the professional staff's review. Okay. So, and if there was, I think these policies began back in March as an affirmation of strong policies. They've taken new legs, and we're working through processes that include everyone. So apologies, but.
No, don't get me wrong, Roger. I totally get what you guys are trying to do, which is why I asked to be involved in it, because I think it's not easy to understand without knowing the inner workings of rec and the history of it, which is why I'm willing to talk to you. I just need to know when I can be involved in that conversation. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Bree. Okay, so let's have board member discussion on the policy as in the packet. Marcia, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I think this is greatly improved. Kudos to you. I have 3 suggestions.
Great.
On page 3, after the first number 3, where the town may require a title search, I continue to be worried about environmental things. And so
Okay.
I'm just wondering if we could add a number 4, that the town may require the donor to provide an appropriate environmental certificate depending upon the nature of the real property being donated.
Okay.
And then,
Put that in.
then on the second number 2, under donations of cash and real goods, I'm wondering, I think the intent is really, you're talking about unrestricted donations. So I'm thinking maybe just adding the word unrestricted, individual donations of unrestricted cash and real goods under $200.
Yes, thank you for that.
And then number 3 on that page, I'm just wondering, this reminds me of a quirk of law that I deal with, but this says limiting it to, it can't be in excess of an annual department budget. And I'm just thinking that's a funny way to express it, because it could be equal to the budget and that's okay, or it could be $2 less than the budget and that would be okay.
Right.
So maybe there's a way, and I guess it goes to what's the purpose of that, other than it would put a wrench in the works for perhaps equity or whatever, I don't know, but I just wonder if we could deal with that so that it's a little clearer than just excess of the budget.
Okay, that makes sense. So I took these notes. Thanks, Marcia. I think if we have a motion, we could say as amended this evening. I think that will make sense. Anybody else have any other suggestions or edits? Go ahead, Rob.
So you opened up the door for the Gerard Fund, calling it a named fund.
Indeed.
What are the restrictions from creating other named funds, such as scholarship funds? Is anything excluded from the policy?
I mean, quite frank, the purposes of was to name and to recognize that sort of the fund already exists and it's being used and established, and there are no further guidelines or conversations around what to do should future opportunities arise. Like the policy
Right.
doesn't make a provision for that. It just doesn't. I think it's perhaps a result of exhaustion. I don't know. No, I just go ahead, Marcia.
I was just gonna say, maybe what we just need to do is explain under named funds. At this time, there is only one named fund in the
Okay.
town of Norwich. Future ones would have to be approved by the board and then go on with the rest of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think named funds is like something that, is essentially being defined by that sentence because they don't otherwise really have any other existence anywhere else. Yeah, okay. Mary?
I think a lot of the intent of this gift policy is to make sure the gifts are appropriate, to make sure that we know when gifts are being made and so forth. I just wonder, I think it's actually great to accept gifts that fit in with the goals of the town. Are we boxing ourselves into not accepting large gifts, or do they imply that there's something about our capital planning? There are elements that we're not aware of. For instance, believe there was a large gift to help renovate the fields at Huntley Meadow. So if someone comes up with that to meet a need, which is, not extravagant in terms of how we want to use the field, but we haven't budgeted for that in our budget, like where does that fall within our policy? Do we want to be able to accept large gifts? And how does that fit in with our sort of knowledge of what we need to plan for in the future and how we need to maintain? our existing infrastructure.
This
Claudette,
doesn't,
Claudette has an idea. Go ahead,
yeah,
Claudette.
well, this policy doesn't prevent anybody from potentially donating large gifts. It just says
Okay.
that it'll come before the select board.
Okay, so we've got a mechanism.
And nobody will solicit for them.
Without coming before the select board.
Okay,
Go ahead, Marcia.
That brings up a good point. Sometimes the policy says the town, and then other times it like the town shall evaluate, etc. And it doesn't really describe who is the town. So
It does. It does at one point, though. I think you
The
made
what?
that edit. It does at one
Where?
point, though, Marcia. You made that edit. It says the town or anybody that should be considered the town. There's like a long list. Let me just pull it up.
under definitions or
I remember,
something.
I remember that. I'm just saying where it says that the town has no obligation. I suppose it means everybody, but when somebody's supposed to accept it and it's a large thing, shouldn't it refer to the board? Well, whatever.
I see.
Well, we're representatives of the town, so,
Right, but so might
So-
be somebody else.
So,
Okay.
so you're saying, so for number 6 and 7, I'm looking at now, it says the town must determine whether or, and then it goes on to say, sometimes this is the select board will consider.
Right.
Okay, I'm happy to clean that up to be more clear. Okay, any other thoughts?
it's getting closer
This was
to
a tough one.
adoption. Yeah,
So the only thing I will say too is when Claudette can say it probably better, because I think she looked at more comps than I did, is that this is really quite unique. Like there isn't a model policy from the LCT. You know, a lot of towns have policies that deal with individuals and sort of the ethics of accepting gifts, right? They don't talk there, and sometimes there's a lot of policies that go around like donor acknowledgement or plaques. There isn't sort of I imagine that somebody will borrow from our policy if they're searching the internet, if they're looking to answer a set of questions, because I think this was hard because we're trying to solve some unique situations. Does that would you agree with that, Claudette?
Yeah, absolutely. There was nothing, VLCT couldn't assist. They suggested putting something on MuniNet, which I did, but I got no response. I searched multiple towns in Vermont, their websites. Again, it was just like Roger said, plaques acknowledging gifts, mostly to rec departments. But there was nothing out there.
And so this will evolve. If we find ourselves that every meeting we're talking about like a small donation to the, like we may learn more things, we may make revisions as appropriate. Clearly, we're going to do a second round or whatever our word is. It is the second reading. So we'll have an opportunity for town staff to more formally review this. Okay. Go ahead, Mary, and then I'm going to ask for a motion.
I will just say that I believe in when we put the master financial policies together, there was the example from VLCT, which is town of Dormont. So, and really the intention there was just to not get caught out with a gift that might be inappropriate. So I think we are taking that idea and just extending it and being more specific. So.
Right, but with VLCT's revisions, they did not include a gift policy.
Okay,
So,
we're fortunate to be given gifts too. I'll say that.
That's what I was gonna say. Maybe we're unique.
Yes.
Yes, we are unique in particular, sometimes exceptional. Okay, so go ahead, Claudette.
I move to approve or to adopt the second read of the gift policy as amended tonight.
there a
I'd
second?
second that.
Okay, made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous. And I will send to Rod, and I imagine it'll go to you, straight to you, Bree, very formally, where we will expect formal written feedback, and then Fielding and in his spare time as he's being onboarded will probably also have some thoughts as well. So thank you in advance to some town staff to get us towards the adoption. All right, now item number 5. This is what I thought we were doing. The revisions to the capital budgeting and program policy and town's master financial policies will review changes and possibly adopt. Okay, so Marcia, were you the first on this one? Or were you the second?
Claudette, were you first? It's so long ago, I can't remember.
Okay.
I think, you want to start?
Well, I would say, I think you had, so this one, after a lot of back and forth, we opted to start with VLCT's model policy. And going, I think, Marcia, I'm going to leave the
No,
so actually, let me back up.
Sure.
The capital budget and plan, what we found, what Marcia discovered was that it was really designed to implement aspects of a town plan, and to impact, to I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but
Impact fees?
yeah, it's right. To address impact fees, maybe is the better way to say it. And so, and we all know the issues we've had with the capital plans that were submitted to the board the previous 2 years, and that we have not adopted one. So this was, I believe, a way for us as a board to be able to set aside funds for future projects or fleet or whatever.
Okay, so
That's not explaining it very well, but Marcia, you could go
well,
further from
so
here, I'm sure.
I don't know sport metaphors, but you set the, I don't know, I won't try. Okay, Marcia, why don't you tell me the sort of the bullet points of what Claudette was saying, and so I'm going to write them down, and then I'm going to like ask them, then we'll address them, and then Rod, I'm going to ask some questions of Rod and Fielding too.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
So basically, the capital budget plan that we had was, I've started to think of these as capital C budget and small c budget. So the capital C budget is the statutory budget that is basically to implement a town plan, and is only, as the attorney at VLTC said to me, it's only, a capital budget and plan is only legally required if a town seeks to impose impact fees on a new development in town. It's a means to make the new development bear the cost of a municipal or school improvements, etc. But it doesn't mean, he says, that a municipality can't have a capital budget and program or some other more informal capital asset planning tool, unrelated, whether in whole or in part, to its implementation of the municipal plan. So what this is trying to do is to say, we recognize the capital budget with a C and the capital budget with a capital C and with a small c, so that we're going to keep track of both as we do our budgeting process. And basically every step of the way, we're saying this is going to be accounted for as something that's under the capital budget plan for the town plan, or it's just our capital budgeting to keep the lights on for all those expensive things that we need to buy. And that's all it's trying to do. So it's trying to say, we understand that there's a mechanism in the law for implementing a town plan if you have one. And we also understand that even though there isn't something in the law that formalizes how people keep the lights on and buy the big ticket items, we've planned for that here.
Okay.
Does that do it, Claudette?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll put this on my screen then a little bit. And then quite frankly, Marcia, I'm going to ask town staff for an analysis of that work, if that's okay. So I wanna ask them too, but Rod is next to me, but he's not in one of your squares. So maybe while
I lost my connection.
he lost his connection. So while I pull up the
I'm struggling to
packet,
find it.
let me look while I pull up this. Okay.
It's been unstable all night.
Okay. Any board members have any comments on these edits that I have up on the screen? Mary, Rob.
Clarification, are your edits in red?
I have no edits. This is.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. This was exactly as sent. It appears that I don't even know who SR5. Seems like someone is in red and someone is in blue. I assume one of them is Claudette and one of them is you.
This has gone through so many revisions, I can't tell you.
So I guess one thing I would like to say is that all of this is trying to do is explain how we put together budgets
Right.
for either something that's addressed as a very long term or something that's addressed as relatively short term, and how it's funded.
So I guess, yes, that makes sense to me. I guess there's the capital budget shall list, I guess, or identify expenses as related to the town's operational plan or the town plan with the estimated cost of such projects. And so presumably this operational plan, which arguably doesn't exist in the spirit of what this policy is seeking to do, would be the document that is essentially the list of, which is essentially the capital budget stuff, the assets.
Remember when we talked about the operational plan with through lines?
Mhm.
And every year we were going to go through and say, this is what we need to do to, keep the lights on and the other things that we can do this year or
Mhm.
our goals. That
Yeah.
was what was referring to. The
Maybe-
small C stuff.
Maybe the operational plan culminates in the budget and the budget process, the annual budget process. But you have to, in doing that, keep track of the items that are already big ticket items that need to be replaced, like the fire engines. And then the town plan could be more aspirational, more, things that deal with changes that are happening, climate change or something like that, or really long-term things like Tracy Hall or changing how your municipal assets are organized in some way. So I don't know. I think operational plan does relate to the annual budgeting process, and you do want to keep track of that, not just in budgeting season, but just as for the whole year, to be thinking about what you're heading for in creating your budget for the next year.
I don't really understand the efficacy of referencing an operational plan at all. Basically, it's my wonder.
Well, would it make more sense to reference it as the annual budget, operating budget? Or not?
Well, yes, but also, yes, a little bit. That would make more sense. So I'm going to stop share. Our finance director has his hand up. Maybe he could help.
Give some
help us out.
insight. Yep.
Go ahead, Fielding.
So just to kind of touch base in terms of the relationship between a capital budget and capital budget plan and the operational plan. In my experience, it is not necessarily a method of directing, say, an operational plan, but it's more so in reference to, I'm going to use an example, basically like Norwich decides to build a pool. With that comes a large capital outlay. You know, you've got to build it, you've got to acquire land, you have to, spend $1 million to build the pool. But with that also comes, a direct relationship with the operational or annual budget. So that's going to add some full-time equivalent employees, lifeguards, maintenance manager, or what have you. It's going to have ongoing heating, maintenance, operational costs. It's going to have, over a long term, it's going to have, a replacement cost because it's eventually going to wear out, parts, boilers, the pool liner, those kind of things. So I did want to just kind of point that out specifically, in that, in my experience, that is typically the reference. The capital plan, yes, does have, say we have using this pool example, that may be a goal of the town and a goal of the town's overarching plan of where they would like to go, amenities they would like to have, services they would like to provide. But I do believe the reference to the operational plan is more on those financial liabilities incurred by those new capital expenditures.
Okay. Rod, Rod, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, let me just try and connect just. Hi, I hope everyone can hear me okay. So I just want to back up what Fielding was saying. So, and connect the dots back to Mary's observations, which I thought were useful. So
Can I hear you? Can I hear you fine?
Can you
Echoey, but yeah, it's good.
Okay. So let me just try and talk a little louder, and let me know if you've got problems. So the town plan is often aspirational, but there are chapters in the town plan, such as the municipal facilities plan, that are clearly intended to work through the issues of what facilities and services that the town intends to offer or reflect on their existing set of offerings. And that could be as mundane or as limited as, if we continue to have the transfer station, for instance, as part of the program, or should we expand the transfer station? So things that we're already accustomed to, as well as new things such as, Fielding's hypothetical example of a pool. I think that the you don't, I think they're struggling here. Okay. So we'll use. Do you want to? Let me mute this and mute.
Okay. Were you folks able to hear Rod, or it wasn't working?
At the
It
end,
was working,
bad.
but something
It was
happened
working?
at the end.
Oh, so it was working, maybe. I saw faces. I couldn't tell if it was working.
Until the
So-
end. It was
His,
Till the
horrible.
end.
his voice was very muddled and
Okay, I think we can't pull enough, I think we can't pull enough bandwidth to run 2 laptops in the room.
Ah.
I think we've got a capital item right here. We have no Wi-Fi. And it's driving me crazy. So anyway, what I was saying was the plan, the municipal plan has an aspirational component to it, but it also is an important document to reflect on the direction that the community wants to take. So a community that is interested in expanding and growing some parts of, develop some parts of the town or not others. That's precisely the sort of place that the town plan is precisely the document that should undertake those kinds of questions. But the municipal facilities and services chapter narrowly is actually a really good chapter to work through the kinds of issues about the range of services, the quantity of those services, or even more arcane issues like the budgeting process and the need for capital improvements. So all those things can be addressed in a town plan. I would say that if you've got, I'm kind of channeling a previous town manager I worked for, if you've got a really good operational budget, that is a plan. That's a plan for the next year's expenditures. When you go off the rails and you don't keep to the budget, you've got a problem. If you can keep to the budget, things are going well. There's plenty of things that can derail an operational budget, external factors like a big storm or, a big decision to accept federal monies for projects. There's all sorts of both positive and negative reasons why you might not be able to stick with an operational budget. Some of those actually could be kind of good, but I think that the point that we're trying to impress upon the select board here tonight is that an operational budget in itself is an operational plan for a 12-month period, July 1 to June 30th. And that's what you're trying to map out. It could be the moment where you have difficult discussions about the range of services that you offer, the range of, the number of staff that you have, those really complex problems about reorganizing the structure of the town. Or it could be, which is more common, we have this set of commitments and we're going to continue doing them. We're going to seek efficiencies where we can find them, and we're going to maintain some kind of equilibrium around the range of services that we provide. There are other embedded commitments in there. So for instance, how you pay and remunerate staff. Are you going to always commit to, remunerate staff in a particular way? Are you going to maintain, those kinds of obligations? Those are also appropriate discussions in that context. What we want to do, I guess, is move to the question of, without wanting to push you, and I'm happy for you to respond here, but I guess we want to tease out the connection between the capital commitments that we've got, which in Norwich, for the most part, are actually vehicle questions. We've got this building, the new police and emergency services building, and we've got DPW, and we've got a range of playing fields and facilities that we operate for the rec department. But beyond those capital items, we have vehicles, which are their own kind of subcategory, and they've got their own weird issues associated with them, including that they wear out and break. So what we'd like to do, I guess, is just get some feedback from you as a group, as a select board, as to what you see the issues or concerns between the operating budget and maintaining the capital budget, if that makes sense for you. And then I'm going to hand back the machine to Roger.
Okay, so, Marcia, your hand is up. Go ahead.
So I think it boils down to the statute, and it explains it perfectly. And it basically says the Planning Commission may submit recommendations annually to the legislative body for the capital budget and program that shall be in conformance with the master municipal plan. So all we're doing here is trying to say that the statute says capital budgeting is, the statutes are only addressing capital budgeting that is made through that one statute. There's
Yes.
nothing to limit us from saying, but you know what? We want to be organized, and we're going to say that we also plan for the big ticket items that Rod was just talking about. And so that's what this document is saying, that we're addressing those capital C, capital C, capital budget items that the planning commission or the municipal plan has in it that we're thinking would be a good thing to implement, or that they have asked us to implement. We're going to look at that in conjunction with the small capital budget requests that are under the operating plan, or whatever you want to call it, that Fielding was talking about.
And that's my, and so that's my one, I guess that's my one question. I think what you're saying, Marcia, is like, well, obviously the statute provides this, but there are more things that are considered capital and that require capital planning. And so this is what you're calling a small c, and you need to find, and the policy needs to provide for that. But I also don't know why we can't just say both of these things are a capital budget. I don't understand why we have to like create a whole third thing, this operational plan, in addition to a yearly operating budget and a capital budgeting plan. That's my only concern. It feels like a burden.
Can I just
ahead,
answer
Claudette.
that, Claudette?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Marcia, you go ahead, and then I just have a comment.
I was just gonna say, to me, it's the same thing as why we pay Fielding to make sure that everything is accounted for in different pockets. It's the same sort of thing. It's good management, and it's us being able to be accountable to people and say, this, basically follow the money. This stream of money was requested from the voters, approved by the voters. It's for this purpose, and this is how it was spent.
Yes, isn't that the yearly budget? That's my only thing. Anyway, go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, part of me is just this, I think this policy helps explain how we fund the designated funds that are actually for the big C capital items. And because all of those designated fund appropriations are part of our operational plan, this helps explain kind of the why. But, I don't know.
I guess I don't want to burden future boards with creating an operational plan in addition to an operational budget and approving a capital budget modification every year. That's all. Go ahead.
No, we would be approving a capital budget every year anyway.
Yes, and we would be doing we would be proposing an operating budget to the voters.
No, I don't see it that way at all. Do you, Claudette?
I'm not quite sure I understand really what Roger was saying.
So I'm going to take Mary and then I'll clarify. Go ahead, Mary.
I tend to agree with Roger that, we're referring to an operational plan. I don't think we even actually have one. But I think, to me, what I think that means is that we're responsible for how money is spent in the town. I think that more closely relates to the operating budget. And it could also relate to a capital budget if we could ever get our act together to do that. But to create a third term, I think is maybe not helpful.
Isn't the operating budget the operational plan, or is the operational plan?
Yeah, well, that's how I see it, that they are the same. I mean, if you just substituted operational budget for operational plan, would that work for everybody? I don't know. I mean, it makes sense to me.
I'm going to take Marcia's comment, and then Fielding has his hand up. It's perhaps that I've added some drama to this. I don't know. Go ahead, Marcia.
I think the word is a red herring, really. I was just trying to distinguish what you all call your regular budget for keeping the lights on and stuff. I was just trying to call it operational. And then trying to refer to the sort of town plan capital budget as a different thing. But I think semantically, it's only semantics. We're not trying to invent 3 different types of budgeting.
So, okay. Okay, so I'm gonna ask for other people's read on it, because maybe, because like now Marcia's saying we're actually reading the thing the same way, which is confusing, but maybe true. Rod, you had your hand up, and then Fielding. So I'm gonna give you my computer.
Sorry about that. Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry about the rotating laptop. Just really quickly, I would state that the operational budget, the annual budget, is effectively the plan for the town to operate, right? That reflects priorities and commitments, including what, if any, yearly contribution you're going to make to supporting the capital plan. And that the kind of capital plan that Marcia's, and I think I'm agreeing with Marcia here. I want to say that the capital plan, the so-called capital planning that's contained in the town plan is general and points to, usually in Norwich's case, points to the need for more work to be done before it actually even moves into a concrete concept or project. So it just identifies things that should be looked at. It doesn't actually say you should build a new pool and you should start next year. It doesn't have that kind of commitment. And that this planning commission, like most planning commissions in Vermont, actually does not present to the select board a capital plan on an annual basis. And, you know, we can get into that. Maybe that's a good idea in the future, but right now we don't have that process, and the planning commission certainly hasn't been doing that work. And it would be interesting to think about what that would entail. Lastly, that we have kind of a capital plan, even if people aren't very happy with it and it doesn't work very well, because we have items of capital that get replaced or improved. So we've got a new emergency services building. You know, that's an item of capital. Somehow you did it. Somehow you planned for it, you found the money for it, you got it built. So you've got this capital. We're just saying, how do you actually develop an appropriate capital plan so that you can guide the long-term operations of the town? And with that, I'm going to I guess Roger can hand it over to Fielding and he can correct me.
Okay. Yes, Fielding, go ahead.
I think we've actually kind of come a little more full circle since I raised my hand. So I do kind of echo what Rod is saying here. You know, ultimately, you know, the capital budget and the capital plan is really the management of capital assets. And, you know, that is ultimately guided by the goals that you as a select board and the voters ultimately set for the town. And how do we manage those assets that come along with those goals? So I feel like we've actually come kind of, you know, onto the same page there. You know, I use the pool example as a hypothetical example of, say, that was a goal of the board and the town, you know, and how are we going to finance those things? So.
Yeah, and so I love that we all think we agree, but that still says operational plan in capital letters. Like, what is an operational plan in this policy? We're all saying that the operational plan is the process that we undergo to have an operating budget? Is that yes? We're all nodding. So
my interpretation is it is the operational budget, like the annual budget that we set. And that is my interpretation of it.
And there's like no hesitation in the way that this policy is written. Will future boards, like if we're if all of us are gone, will a future board understand the operational plan? No, right? So go ahead, Marcia. That will never happen.
We can't know what they'll know. But
okay, yes. but what I'm calling for, and then I'm going to let Mary, is just saying that we should adjust the semantics of this a little bit. All right, that's all I'm saying. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I think we should just replace operational plan with operating budget, and it would clean it up.
Yeah,
That's what we think it is, right?
Okay.
don't we do that?
In
Is
my
that what it is?
experience, we've added some verbiage here. You know, I think the intent of, you know, the policy before the additions as written was to say, we're going to identify the ongoing costs as related to these capital projects and assets. I think by adding, you know, the town's operational plan, it does create this confusion, you know, on a blind read.
So let's fix that. Can we, is that something, does someone have a suggestion now? Otherwise, because we're over on this, I would just like to have a second reading and then know that someone will accept these changes and create a clean document that addresses that, and then we'll move forward. So Rod actually thinks he could help us. So should we take his suggestions to see if we can get it? Okay, go ahead.
Claudette?
Just give us the electronic file.
Yes, we could also, sorry.
We will accept the changes, including the change that Mary suggested. And then we can give it back to you with any staff comments.
Okay, so Rod is, I don't know if you heard him, but he is suggesting that we can make the change that Mary suggested, clean up the file, and then send it back to us. So I think what we can do is do the same process, have a second reading, and know that this will go to town staff for their review.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right, so can I get a motion?
Well, let's see.
I move to accept the capital budget and program policy for operational planning and municipal improvement planning as amended tonight. That
Yes.
work?
Yes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Okay,
So just to be clear, it's going to do this loop and it's going to come back to the select board, because that's not exactly the way that motion read, but I'm not.
the motion, so Rod is asking for clarity on our motion. I believe that we did a second reading, right? And that it's not a formal adoption, but we nonetheless expect to have the amended changes and then a quick adoption and a future date where we won't have substantial discussion. Does that make sense? But yeah. Okay. All right. I should have done this at the top. I would like to, I don't know if you can add a break onto your agenda, but I'm going to do that. So let's take a break and come back at 8:03. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, resuming the September 29th special select board meeting at 8:05. The next item on the agenda is the budget calendar and preparing for a budgeting process. So we're going to continue to discuss expectations for budgeting. So staff can be advised. If nothing else, we'll have a calendar, right? So department heads know when they are invited to speak with us. So, so actually, like, maybe let's begin actually with Fielding and Rod. Fielding, you, in your discussions with Rod, you've begun a little bit of a budgeting process with our department heads. Can you just describe what that looks like so far? Like, what has happened in the weeks leading up to today?
So quick overview of kind of where we are at in the process. Herb, prior to my arrival, had requested capital expenditures, the justification for each, how much they'll cost, those kind of things by September 1st. Most departments did deliver on that due date. We are doing a little bit of work with DPW to fine tune theirs, given their lack of a director. And so we've been kind of working through that process. In the meantime, I have scheduled individual meetings with each department head to review their capital budgets or their capital budget requests, I should say, and basically fine tune and get a better understanding and a further understanding of those specific needs. They are, quote unquote, for the lack of a better word, the experts for those purchases. I know fire trucks are red. I know they're expensive, but I don't necessarily know how they work. So, and what can go wrong. And so that's really pretty helpful, I think, in terms of understanding the costs and why they are what they are.
So that's,
from,
so I'm going to actually go ahead, finish your sentence, but go ahead, sorry. But this is
yeah,
good,
so
a good, go ahead.
so from there, a lot of what I'm asking too is and kind of reflecting back to the previous conversation, how does this affect our ongoing operational plans? So are there going to be additional staff requirements as a result, more maintenance, more what have you, that comes from that new capital asset? Are there going to be, increased expenditures through, I look at like IT services, if we expand our computer assets, there's going to be, a resulting workload with that, or ongoing maintenance or increased software expenses, those kind of things, all those little deals. With that, that leads up to our operational budget, which rough drafts are due on October 1st. So we're kind of fine tuning those conversations, making sure we highlight all those individual things. With that, we'll circle back and have another round of meetings in terms of analyzing historical expenditures, those type of, backup and historical data to inform our projections for the next fiscal year operationally.
Okay,
and I'll let you jump in, Roger.
Yes, sorry. So I think that's really great. That explains even in your first few weeks, right? I think Rod has identified that you have some expertise to offer, and he's sort of onboarded you into a process, some of which has been previously established by town administration, some of which needs to obviously be refined. So I'm gonna, because I like beginning with the documents, and we talked about this document a little bit. I didn't expect to, but since you started talking about capital, we'll talk about this document. So this is the capital budget and program that folks might have seen. This is what Herb had often called the first generation capital plan document. And so we're not going to talk specifically about this document tonight, but I sort of, from sort of hearing board members speak, I imparted to Fielding and Rod in a conversation that the board needed to, regards to capital, but really all budgeting, board members need to understand justifications for capital items as department heads understand them, a set of prioritization of these capital budget items, not only within the department itself, but within all of the departments overall. And then we also need to understand the methods and sources of financing and how that interacts with operating and how it meaningfully relates to designated fund appropriations, right? So that being said, Fielding, why don't you talk to me or talk to the board, because you already talked to me, about some concerns you have in this document. How would you refine this document to get at justifications, prioritization, and funding sources?
Roger, could you increase the size of what we're looking at? Is that possible?
I can, but you don't really. It was mostly just to say that this document is going to get
Pick it up
revised.
there. Okay,
And
that's good.
so
That's fine.
so
Did increase it. Thank you.
But so go ahead. So Fielding, go ahead. Why don't you say, what are some issues or some of the ways that this document can be improved for board presentation?
So I agree right out of the gate. I think an order of priority is critical in terms of guiding the board and by default the town and the town citizens in terms of, you know, what is an immediate need versus what is more of what's something we should plan through allocations to a designated fund for the future versus what is a I hesitate to say a want, but like something that would be, you know, great to have, you know, in terms of that order. There are some things, you know, if you know, one of our 2 plow trucks goes down for whatever reason, that's going to create a, you know, a much more critical need versus maybe updating an AC system that is really more comfort based or something like that. You can use a million different examples for it. But I think the order of priority is really critical to helping everyone understand what exactly should be focused on. You know, we don't have unlimited funds, so you need to, you know, allocate those effectively. I think in terms of justification, a lot of that comes from in terms of, you know, budget scheduling and planning. I think a lot of the justification comes from some additional documents. I call them singulars. There are other terms that people have used, but primarily that goes into the kind of nuts and bolts and the finances behind an individual capital asset. So that would be, you know, if we use the example of a police cruiser or an aging police cruiser, mileage, hours that it's used annually, ongoing maintenance, both annually as well as cumulatively in terms of cost. These data points all help build a justification for the replacement of a given asset. And I think are really critical in terms of helping everyone understand just exactly how needed something is. So I think those 2 are the biggest additions I would recommend, and that understanding that comes along with it.
So just to reiterate, this document might not look the same, but it will include on this document a justification and a prioritization. So we're starting with what has been prepared, and we'll have Fielding and Rod, of course, work with departments to have justifications with data points, right? And I'm reiterating what Fielding said: justifications with data points, and then prioritization.
Yeah, in terms of funding, I do think highlighting, and I think this document does do it to a little bit, you know, or makes the attempt. You know, there are already designated funds for certain, you know, fire apparatus vehicles. There are, you know, there's already a highway bridge fund. So some of these funds do exist and do have current appropriations for them on an annual basis to help fund these. I think that could be done a little bit clearer. And it could, I think what also would be beneficial is rather than, you know, having to jump to another document in the town, you know, report that shows the current, you know, balance of said fund, is to include that. And I think that would help you really make it a one-stop shop, kind of, so to speak. All right, well, how are we looking on our highway fund or highway bridge fund? Are we really underfunding this, or is it underfunded already?
Right.
And it'll help you make a decision in terms of, okay, we really need to look at this. And it'll help us jump off the page, so to speak.
And so, Fielding, one of the examples we were talking about was the air compressor, because that was recently purchased, and it came from a highway equipment fund, right? It wasn't necessarily an asset that was named in this plan, but in using the highway equipment fund designated fund to make this purchase, that was not planned on. So when we make appropriations for our designated funds, there needs to be some kind of method to account for something like an air compressor. But then also, you know, with staff with staff the way it has been in DPW, we haven't made all of the purchases that we allocated for to the designated fund last year. So what is it that we don't have to allocate for this year, right? So, you know, there's, I think all of that has been part of a binder, part of a justification that Herb has provided us in the past. But I think now I think the ask that I have made on behalf of the board to these folks is that that needs to be made more explicit to us. Is that anything to add to that, Fielding?
I do think that those like historical data points. So, you know, for example, if we use the highway equipment fund, you know, we appropriated $40,000 for that this year, with the set, you know, idea of goals that we were going to use to spend that money. You know, there are, for example, there's historical, you know, data that backs up, okay, we're going to go through, we may not know the compressor is going to die this year, but we do know that over time, certain equipment does fail. Last year it was a plasma cutter. The year before that, it was a hydraulic system for a plow. The year before that, so on and so forth. And that kind of builds a historical data set that allows you to appropriate enough funds to cover these expenditures as they come along, typically on the unplanned side of things. You know, we can plan for a new plow truck. We know how many miles, give or take, roughly how many miles we're going to put on that in a given year. But we also need to take into account those unplanned, or we're planning for them, but we just don't know exactly when they're going to fail. Like an air compressor lasts 12 to 15 years. Our last one was 15 years. It performed admirably. But it wears out, it fails, and we need to replace it. Maybe we could have gotten another year, maybe it would have been last year. But you want to appropriate funds in anticipation of said failure, because we know it will happen at some point.
Right. And then I'll say one more thing, and then I'm going to stop and ask board members if they have any reactions. So we'll have an improvement to this document using this data and an ability for board members to talk about justifications, prioritizations, and then we'll also have a vehicle replacement schedule, right, that will be crafted on some data points that Fielding referenced, and then also, you know, with just the needs and I guess wants, which I also hate to use, of the department.
Yeah, so, I do think a historical, like a 5-year rolling average would be useful for this document. You can see that, you know, right out of the gate. As you look 5 years ahead, you can look 5 years back and see what was that historical average. I'm going to reference, I think it was you, Marcia, a couple meetings ago, and you were looking for I think you called it a list of what we insure, but typically a list of overall capital assets. And it's a document I'm currently working on that will provide, you know, kind of, okay, this was purchased here. We, you know, are anticipating, you know, a full list of assets that we have, you know, and you'll see as you go through that data, like, here's what our annual cumulative maintenance costs for this have been. Here's what, and it gives you that kind of general list. So not only do you have, okay, we have $5 million, just to pick a round number of capital assets, you know, it gives you their age, their costs, their ongoing costs, and will help you guide those decisions. I'll defer.
Okay, so hopefully all that inspires confidence and also excitement. Mary, go ahead.
Just briefly, in terms of the 5-year rolling average, it might be skewed a little bit in that we had a severe storm in 2017, and we kind of robbed a little bit or bunch from our designated funds. So that has been, you know, we haven't really, I think, caught up from that action. So I think that should be just taken with a grain of salt.
Right.
Or just that you're aware of it, that skews that what would be normally, you know, I think normally there's probably a certain increase that you would notice, but that storm, we really got whacked by that. and had damage, almost equal to the municipal budget itself that we had to take care of immediately, road damage and so forth. So that, we sort of did some creative financing there, but I don't think we've actually caught up from that.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I commend you. I think all of those are great improvements that you've got planned. And I'm also wondering if we could see something like an overlay, a distillation of, the current picture of what is our debt load, what is our lease load, and in terms of the reserved funds that we have, what's the purchase money that we need, for the things that we've got planned.
What's a reserve fund? No, I kid. Go ahead, Marcia. No, sorry.
So I'd like to see that sort of also in the context of priorities. So if we've got these priorities, what else are we encumbered and how are we encumbered, so that we can be thinking about what's the best way, and that debt policy that Mary and I have been working on, that should be, sort of in the mix, so that we make sure that we're not getting ourselves in too deeply one way or the other, and keeping our interest rates down and things like that.
Thank you, Marcia. I think I saw folks nodding, so I think that was really helpful. Anyone else? Claudette, go ahead, and then Mary.
Yeah, just to echo what everybody else is saying, I think this document is going to be extremely helpful for us when we see how the overall prioritization goes, and do we agree with that prioritization and coming to some kind of agreement on prioritization. And Fielding, I just have a question. Have you worked with municipal leasing, which is just different from vehicle leasing, in that my understanding of municipal leasing is that you own the equipment once the lease is expired, which is different from a traditional lease where you have to pay out or buy out the vehicle?
In my experience, we typically I've purchased the asset, or my department has purchased the asset. In terms of municipal leasing, in a very general sense, it's not very different, I think, from what you would consider like financing a car or something along those lines. In a very general sense, there are some technical differences, but in a very general sense, it's not much different from that, what you would picture.
Okay.
So
Basically an accounting aid. Yeah, sorry. I mean, municipal leasing is a way to change the attitude towards the expense, the yearly expense in essence. Same thing, outlay of money, interest paid, just a
Right,
different name.
but yeah, my understanding, just to reference Hartford, when one of their fire trucks inadvertently couldn't be used, they went the municipal lease route to purchase something that was not entirely funded through their designated fund. But what they continue to say is that at the end of the lease period, they flat out own the vehicle. There's no buyout with like the traditional car lease. So just an option there.
Claudette, what's the term of the lease? Do you know?
Not a clue.
Right. That's the catch. Rod, I don't know if you heard Rod suggest that was it. That's the catch. But yes, I think maybe it's a little bit of an open question. Mary, you've had your hand up though. Go ahead.
Yeah, just in the way you've sort of framed this conversation, will we be also discussing your memo that had the calendar? Because I've got a question there.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think the conversation started with capital, so I wanted to say, just to, we can move on now, I think.
Yep.
the operating, but I think in the past, we had like a longer process, right? Where we had multiple lists from multiple sources, and that we were going to find some way to collect it and reframe the information and then talk about them point by point and adopt something in August, is what we had said. But we now have the benefit of folks some professional staff and who have advised on how to work with the existing document, and so we can move forward. So I wanted to let you know that this is a different approach than what we had talked about in our operating plan conversations. So, okay. So why don't we move on to the calendar then a little bit, if that's okay. So I'll bring that up on the screen. Okay.
Roger, while you're bringing that up on the screen, can I just make a observation?
Yes.
I went online last night and looked to see what CPI was, and it's I think at 5.3%.
Yep.
So one would expect that our budget will have to at least increase by 5%.
Yes.
To cover.
Yes, Claudia, you and I have had similar late night thoughts. Which is why I'm trying to keep it more light than I should. But in October 13th, we definitely want a report on our obligations for personnel from that. We have, my understanding
we won't have healthcare cost increases by then, though.
We won't. So we're going to have, I'm hoping to have some estimates, but I don't know how realistic, but we definitely have some estimates for CPI, and we definitely have a number from the union contract that we are obligated to. So we'll get those, I hope to get those numbers by October 13th to us. So before we really go into anything else, we'll know what we're obligated to for personnel. Is that helpful? Does that answer your question or concern?
Yeah, I guess my overall comment was just based on the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I'm always one for a flat budget, but with a 5%.
So let's actually, Mary has her hand up, but let me just say that at this meeting, I want to actually talk about our expectations a little bit for the tax impact, and then talk about some calendaring and stuff. Mary, you have your hand up though.
Oh, just probably possibly in the October 13th discussion. I would also like to talk about our professional services line. Maybe our chart of accounts needs a little bit of revision. That I'm concerned about that line, and like an analysis of that, and to sort out various legal expenses. I think we've used it for expertise in making estimates for building projects and things like that. But I think that could use an analysis, and I think that category in general is creeping up in a way that we should talk about. So when we get to that part, and I was very pleased with just the emphasis in October 13th about the costs, like the CPI, that tend to go up by whatever % per year, because they are going to impact our tax rate, just what we have to pay before you even make any decisions. They're just sort of locked in. So I was pleased to see that in there.
Right. Okay. I don't know where to even begin. So I guess the first thing we'll do something administrative. I think this is charting out a couple of special meetings. It basically has this meeting every month in November, and it also includes we're meeting during some holiday weeks. So, which is just, I don't think we should talk about it tonight, but it's just to say that if you have any objections or any concerns or other obligations that you're not able to meet, let me know. Just send word and we can, it's not substantial discussion, so we can talk about calendaring over email.
Okay.
So maybe I'll make that just rhetorical, but unless anyone wants to say anything about the fact that we're meeting a lot.
I think we need to meet a lot, get it done.
I agree.
Okay. Cool. So it sounds like I won't hear any objections, and we can just assume that this schedule will exist. Okay, let me know though. Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about what we expect for the tax impact. I think given sort of staff vacancies, and given that we're in sort of year 2 of a pandemic, and knowing that we have some inflation on everything, right? Not only just in personnel, but things like fuel, things like salt, things like building materials, that we might wish to advise town staff to prepare for a level funded operational budget. But I don't want to assume that, so I want to hear what folks think.
It's hard to talk about that without the numbers. But I know last year when our presented budget was 20% tax increase, we all freaked out. So.
So
Yeah, I think I want to keep it as the tax impact as minimal as possible, but I don't. So Roger, if you're saying a level funded budget, that means actually
It'd still be an increase.
right. So it can't be level funded if we're estimating that there's going to be a 5%
In the
CPI.
CPI, and haven't taken into account the health, plan increases and things like that.
So are you suggesting outside of the increases that must be covered? Or are you saying if there's a 5% increase in a salary line item that the rest of the budget drops 5%?
I think that's an important question. Thank you, Claudette. What I'm suggesting is that we have our obligations that will have inevitable increases, and we need to meet our obligations, and thus anything that isn't an obligation, which is essentially anything that's not personnel, we are not. We're less keen on increases, I guess is what I would say. But maybe Fielding and Rod could find a way to articulate what I'm saying. But maybe Marcia can. Go ahead, Marcia, your hand's up.
No, I'm not offering that solution, but I will say,
Okay, what are you saying? Go ahead.
I'm just saying that perhaps the ARPA funds, there might be things in there that we could use to offset some of the things, because it is pandemic related.
It is. It's an eligible use. Fielding, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think just to clarify, Roger, I think you're referencing maintaining the current level of service.
Yes.
Versus like saying adding new programs or expenditures and services on top of that. You would like to maintain the level of service we're currently providing, but dealing with those inflationary pressures that we're all dealing with.
Yes.
Okay.
Do others agree?
That would be a great goal.
Okay.
It's a good starting point.
Mhm.
I belabor this because it was feedback that Herb wanted. So we offer that feedback explicitly this time. Okay. All right. So any other thoughts on any of the other? So I think the last I have in here on the September 29th to discuss the planning process for determining eligible ARPA projects as it relates to capital budgeting. And so I think, I asked Rod last time, how is it that communities are having discussions of ARPA money and how to use this money, right? And I think the short answer is that they talk about it imminently in their budget process. And so to me, it seems like if we have the diligence and the discipline of a capital budget document that has justifications and prioritization, we could begin to tease out what ARPA money should be allocated. I'm seeing some nods. I wonder what people think. Claudette, go ahead.
There are two things. I do know that there are some boards, some select boards in towns that are making the decisions on their own.
Okay.
I do know that there are others that are inviting public input. And I also know that there's one of the big topics for town fair next Monday, I believe, is ARPA funding. And so, I'm my personal preference is to have public input. I recommended I suggested a listening session.
Yep.
Clearly, some things that the public raised may not be covered by ARPA, but I would be interested in hearing what our residents would like us to spend this money on.
Okay. Rob?
Well, we have to keep in mind that there are restrictions and priorities that are stipulated with the money that we really need to pay attention to, and the public should be made aware of those before we randomly go say, well, what do you want to do with $250,000?
Yeah.
And I was at the VLCT annual meeting today, where they mentioned that they've got a full-time staff member working on trying to figure out ARPA and share the information with towns. So the town fair thing on Monday should be pretty useful.
Go ahead, Mary.
I'm picturing, Roger, what you were talking about within our operating budget as sort of spreading the ARPA money among a bunch of smaller categories, all of which we're going to have to defend. And I'm wondering whether, if we are talking ARPA, if it might make sense to at least consider larger amounts for something like affordable housing, which we have underfunded since 1997, which is an urgent need, which could bring in additional pupils to the school, which might lower the tax rate. So I don't think we should rule out the idea of spending ARPA money for something like that, like a larger impact sort of use for it.
Okay, Claudette?
Yeah, I just want something like affordable housing. Number one, I'm not sure it's covered under ARPA. Number two, I don't think we could finish the project by 2026.
Or?
Okay.
Which is what is required. Or
Rob?
expend the funds by that.
That's
I
right.
understand. Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
Okay. My understanding is things like affordable housing are actually high on the list of acceptable uses, and but it may very well be that the money that would be allocated is primarily for planning, engineering, all the pre-construction things that can be accomplished in time.
I think it has to be not just planned on, but expended or some kind under some kind of formal commitment before 2024 is just what it is. So the only thing I'll say to that is my hope is that when we do a little bit more diligence on this capital budget document, that there's some things that will like clearly float to the top. Of course, I am thinking of the Tracy Hall project, not so much for all the good energy initiatives that have been proposed in the past, but because of the fact that we don't have a generator and we need to replace the boiler. No one is here with me because in part of ventilation. And we might also want to think about, and we might want to think about, some kind of architectural study because it's difficult to have a confidential conversation with a town manager because the office is maybe not what it should be. I don't know. I'm speculating. I would like a study to maybe tell me that. So I don't want to just like float that in this special meeting and say like Roger would like Tracy Hall, but I think it will inevitably float to the top. Marcia, your hand was up.
That's an example of a larger project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Marcia, your hand was up though.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really important to be thoughtful about this because we don't want to violate any guardrails. And so I'll be very interested to hear what Claudette learns on Monday. And
Right.
I think we have to remember that $1 million or $2 million is not much money. And so we really have to think thoughtfully about how it's going to be spent. And if we do have listening sessions, which I think is a good idea, we present some real strong guardrails based on what we've learned and what's realistic for that amount of money.
Okay, well, okay, I think that's all really good food for thought. So we're over time in this agenda item considerably, with apologies. So let's do board members, the rest of, I'm gonna turn to Fielding and Rod for any of their thoughts on any of this that's proposed, but otherwise I think you see a method of scheduling where a department presents, the board comes prepared to discuss what was been prepared and prepared by the department head. And then in the next meeting, we expect a revision based on that discussion. I think in the past, we've had the presentation, we've thanked folks for their time, we've gone to the end and had sort of the total picture conversation. What I'm proposing here is that we get into the conversation at the department level and make it clear that we have what changes we may or may not have, and then we see a revision reflected pretty quickly afterwards, so that way we can chart progress before we then talk about everything. That's all I got. Go ahead, Marcia.
And where does the new and improved, whatever you call that sheet that Fielding's working on, where does that fit in?
Yes, so the new and improved sheet was discussed after the fact, but I think when you begin to start, I think we have capital budgetings.
November 3rd, right?
October 27th is when we start coming back. And so I hope that we'll have it by then.
Okay.
But I'm going to turn to now Fielding and Rod to see what they think of any of this, and then we'll move on to the last agenda item. Okay, Fielding, do you have any thoughts on this document? Budgeting.
I think these are attainable goals in terms of dating. I do think I do want to just clarify, the capital budget. I think we're going to be. It feels in reading the document that you're looking to really hammer that down prior to hearing from department head presentations. I wonder if before completely locking that in, you should wait to hear, or if you have questions for them directly, to at least be able to address those questions to the department head who has the most institutional knowledge of that. that doesn't mean we can't have a priority and the document by the 27th. But I think that may be worthwhile for you as well.
That makes sense.
Right, so you're saying there might be some efficacy to not sort of jump in to discuss the document, but rather have the document ready and in hand and like hear from these folks. Like that document should inform the later discussions, is what you're saying.
Correct, yes.
That Rod agrees, and that makes sense.
What are we going to call this document for ease of thinking about it?
Capital budget.
I typically call it a capital improvement plan, or a capital budgeting plan. Either one really works.
But it's that spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a capital improvement plan.
Yeah, new
Yes,
improvement.
and as Rod said, and what Herb often said, it meets all statutory requirements of a capital budget. So, alas, okay. I know. I'm just trying to bring some humor to our very serious conversations. Okay, so I think we can move on because we feel good.
Yep,
You feel okay? Okay.
move on.
All right.
Yeah,
So, yeah. Okay. So, thank you, Fielding, for being here. And I think the next for the next item is an executive session to discuss the hiring of an interim town manager. So, can someone make a motion? There's two motions.
Did we not make a motion to adopt the budget calendar?
Oh, we didn't. Would we
No.
like to do that?
Should we not?
We
We
didn't.
We did not do it. We could do
Why
it.
don't we do it? Let's do it.
All right. I move to adopt the budget calendar for fiscal year 23 as contained in the select board meeting packet.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, Marcia. I appreciate that. Unanimous. Okay, so now let's move officially onto the agenda item and two motions.
Yeah,
Would you like to go, Mary?
Okay.
Mhm.
I move to find that premature general public knowledge will put the town at a substantial disadvantage in its contract negotiations with an interim town manager by disclosing terms of their employment and compensation before the select board has an opportunity to properly consider and discuss the same.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. Okay. Is there a second?
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA section 313A1A to consider the interim town manager contract.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. So I'm pushing pause. Okay, is there a motion to enter public session?
I move to enter public session.
Okay, is there a second? Okay,
Second.
made by Mary, seconded by Rob at 9:22. Is there any action we would like to take?
Well, we have to vote on entering public session first, right?
Oh, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Now indeed, 9:23, when we voted, we're in public session. Now, is there an action that we wish to take? I'm happy to do it.
All right.
Well, I can't do it. I shouldn't do it. Go ahead.
Who's gonna do it?
Let's see if I get it right. I don't know. I move to authorize the chair to send a signed contract to the interim town manager candidate.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? No? I will send it first thing tomorrow
Gotta
morning.
We
You
have
gotta
to
vote.
vote on.
vote.
Gotta
Yes.
vote.
Yes, I was just saying I will send it first thing tomorrow morning, but I guess I should vote first before I actually say that.
Yes.
So yes, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. So yes, so now I will, thank you. And I will send it first thing tomorrow morning. So
Thanks,
Mention it
Rob.
was unanimous.
that was unanimous. Thank you.
Mention it.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your time. We are only, what, an hour off schedule. So Rob has nudged me to be a better timekeeper, and I will be better. So thank you, Rob. All right, let's get out of here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
No,
I move to
excuse me,
adjourn.
Roger. Roger, can I
Linda.
ask a question?
Yes, you may make a public comment. Go ahead.
Okay, you did not see my hand go up?
I did not know.
Okay, because I did push it for you, but maybe it doesn't enter. When will the
okay.
name be released to the public?
As soon as the candidate were to sign, we would be happy to make an announcement. So
Great, thank you very much.
okay. Okay, great. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I had made the motion, but there's no second yet.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, good night. Thanks so much, unanimous.
Good night.
Take care.